All right. Thank you, Aaron Schiller, for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Would you please tell us a bit about yourself, your history, and what you do?
Sure. It's always fun to tell my story. It's always been an adventure to me. I've never see what's coming next has been the fun part of my story. But professionally, I started off as a special education teacher,
Mm-hmm.
working with kids with behavioral challenges and emotional challenges. And that led me on a journey to learn really about the human condition and what people go through and how hard it really can be for young people. And then ultimately what that looks like when they become adults. And so I've been on a journey where I've been a trainer. I've worked in corporations doing everything from large scale trainings to coaching executives to working with teams to help people find more harmony and work better together. And more recently, I've really focused a lot more on helping people to heal and how to be able to take what's happening in their life and see it sort of like a medicine of sorts, and that everything that happens, every challenge, every hardship is actually an opportunity for us to grow and to become the people that we're here to be. So that's what I've been up to. And I
Hmm.
also do some work with Yale University and their emotional intelligence lab, where I've learned a lot more just around the science of emotional intelligence. So I like to think I bring sort of the science and the heart of emotional intelligence to people so that we can all go a little bit deeper in what it means to be a human, what it means to have feelings, what it means um, to grow and to be successful.
Right. Uh, can you go a bit more in depth regarding your work with Yale?
With Yale, yeah. So they found me. I was working with families, teaching families how to work through really painful emotional experiences. And we met and started talking collaboration. And so I started using some of their tools that they use. They have Yale's Emotional Intelligence Lab has a program for schools across the United States, and they do some work globally um, where they teach people how to bring emotional intelligence into their schools. And so that teachers and students and parents can have a shared language around feelings, and also how to learn how to have the feelings that you want to have more of versus just talk about the feelings that are so unpleasant. And so I don't know if you do show notes, but I definitely recommend people go to the rulerapproach.com, RULER approach.com. And they have a whole bunch of tools there that we can talk about. But yeah, working with Yale has been amazing. I mean, their research is incredible. They've done some great work with Facebook, and they've done some great work with celebrities to really try to like make feelings like normal to talk about. That it's not some weird thing to have a feeling. It's called being human,
Right.
right? You have feelings, don't you?
Yeah, for sure.
See? Right now we're having feelings. It's like
Yeah.
feelings are part of our life. Yet, I think our ancestors started to just started to close off some of those feelings, and we don't all come from a very, at least in the Western world, a very expressed culture and society. A lot of feelings get muted or get like you could be ashamed for having feelings. For a lot of boys, I don't know how it is in Sweden, but in the United States, if you have too many big feelings and you're crying and you're a little kid, people will give you a hard time. They'll tell you not to act like a girl, they'll tell you to toughen up, or they'll tell you to be a man, which is totally weird things to say, because what does it actually mean to be a man, right? To not have feelings or to really own our feelings?
Right. Hmm. So I agree with you that it is very important to own your feelings. Uh, but you mentioned as well that you coach people on how to feel more of what they want to feel
That's
and
right.
not feel so much of the unpleasantness of life. To me, they seem a bit contradictory.
Hmm.
Can you go into your
Well, I
philosophy
mean,
on it?
what like I'll ask you a question. Like, what do you think most people would like to feel in a day? How do you think most people want
Love,
to feel?
love.
Love. They want to feel happy,
Yeah,
joy, right?
yeah,
But most people are feeling anxious, stressed,
right,
overwhelmed, angry, sad,
right.
lonely. More of the feeling words that we hear talked about are the unpleasant ones. And what Yale does is they created a model where they have a grid. It's
Mhm.
a four-axis grid that looks like this, and basically it's the energy matched with pleasantness is their whole thing. So a feeling that has high energy but isn't very pleasant would be like anger,
Mm.
right? When you're angry, you feel full of energy, but it's not a
Mm.
pleasant feeling. Versus
Right.
if you feel really sad, It's unpleasant, but it's kind of low energy.
Mm.
Interesting from Yale's research, the lowest energy and most unpleasant feeling is despair.
Hmm. Why?
It's just how they've done well, because think about it. Despair has, if you're feeling despair, you're like lying in your bed doing nothing.
Hmm.
You've given up on life. You
Yeah.
feel despair. And so there's no energy there. Um, there's nothing to move you. So you
Yeah.
just want to be there. Versus, if you have ecstatic joy,
Hmm.
think about when like a team wins a big championship. For the winning fans, everyone's jumping up and down, hugging each other, shouting for joy, right? There's a ton of
Right.
energy there. And the people who lost are sad and
Right.
melancholy, and they don't jump up and down, and they walk
Yeah.
out with their heads down. And
Right.
this is the emotional landscape that we as human beings navigate. These energetic feelings, these low energy feelings, pleasant ones and unpleasant ones. And that's really how Yale starts the conversation about feelings.
Hmm. So let's take a step back and
Please.
start with defining what is emotional intelligence
Great. The way I like to
in your view. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I just think it's the understanding of my own emotional experience, having a sense of your emotional experience, and then being able to navigate a good way forward by utilizing all that collective data in the moment. Right? So it's not just about emotional intelligence isn't just about how I feel. It's also about having some sense about how another person feels.
Right.
Which I like to say, that's why for parents or for managers at companies, there's a lot of emotions flying around. So not only do you have to be able to check in on yourself and go, wow, I'm feeling frustrated and angry. Oh, wow, but that person is also feeling frustrated and angry. How do two frustrated, angry people come together for a good outcome? That's emotional
Right.
intelligence.
And
So one of the
how
first,
how
what's
do
that?
they come together? How do they
Well, I
come
think
together?
it starts by having an honoring of how we're all feeling, starting with the feeling, right? One of the things I wanted to share on your show today is that, like, I think one of the best things any human can do while listening to the show or whenever is to be able to stop and feel from the body perspective, how am I feeling? Versus when we skip over that part and we just go to the mind. I think if you take those two frustrated, angry people who don't know that they're feeling frustrated, and angry, that situation can get pretty volatile pretty quick because the words they use, the tonation, the emotion that they start to show each other can enrage the other person.
Yeah.
But if you take those same two people and they start the conversation, let's say it's just me and you, for example. Say you and I are both frustrated and angry. We don't realize it, but we are. And we say, hey, before we start talking, let's just check in on how we feel.
Mm-hmm.
And the first words out of our mouth are not you blah 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 and you did this and that. It's just I feel really angry and frustrated.
Right.
And then you say I feel really angry and frustrated. Well, now we're gonna have a different experience because we both know how each other feel without having attacked the other person, without blaming anybody. We haven't done anything except own what we're experiencing.
Right.
And to me, that's the foundation of a new way forward around emotional intelligent communication.
Mm.
Is the owning of the feeling without the owning of the meaning. So we don't really know why we're so angry and frustrated sometimes. It might be because of a specific thing, because I was late or you were late, but it could be like I got in a car accident this morning and I'm really mad that that person didn't have insurance and now you're late with your assignment. And so now it seems like I'm really mad at you because of the assignment, but maybe it's really what happened earlier. Like we don't know. We just know that we feel something.
Yeah. And in my experience, it is worth a lot just to feel what you're feeling. Even if you're angry and that is an unpleasant emotion, just knowing, as you're saying, just checking in does improve your ability to interact with the other person afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can just take a step back, and I'm not saying that you should take a step back now, I'm saying to our listeners, if you can just take a step back and observe what is going on, so being a bit more mindful, I think that can help you communicate better with people and succeed in your relationships. Would you agree with that?
100%. Yeah. Yeah, I would.
Yeah. And I'm constantly grappling with this question in my mind of whether to seek pleasant emotions or not. Because to me, mindfulness entails completely observing whatever is in the moment and not seeking pleasure or pleasant emotions. What's your take on that aspect of mindfulness?
I mean, I think that mindfulness is a wonderful tool to presence ourselves. I think I prescribe more to a probably more spiritual orientation to mindfulness than the Western kind of just like no thoughts, just be present. And I think that from that approach, I think spirit wants us to enjoy our life and to have happiness and joy. And so by listening to the impulses in our body and in our mind, we will be guided towards the thing that will answer that for lack of a better term, that prayer for the feelings we want to have. So if I want to have happiness in my life, then I'm sort of asking that of the universe, then the things that I'm guided to, if I'm really mindful and present, will be the things that I believe will bring that feeling to me.
I see.
So I'm always in this process of like, what is for me based on what is it that I've been asking for? And can I align myself to those things and allow things to be impulse led to some extent, so that I'm not always having to plan everything out and feel like I am the one making everything happen. I can kind of turn over part of my life to universal flow, or to, sort of, so I could be a little bit more like an apple tree, than a computer.
Right. When do you see value in doing the opposite of that?
Of like doing what I'm not told to do, kind of thing. There's a rebellious nature.
Yeah, I'm interested in that too. But my question was actually not being the apple tree, instead activating your more thinking parts of yourself and decision-making, planning aspects.
I mean, it's a really good question. I'm in the process right now of sort of really moving the other way, away from that. I think as an entrepreneur, I have spent my time as a planner and as somebody who's like, can just figure out a way to try to create revenue or just kind of, launch something. But I've found that for me, it's been very difficult to really, and I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there who have this, where because that approach is so fast and it's always planning and it's so clever, so to speak, that nothing matures fully. And so that there's just like this constant launching of something, some success, and then it fizzling out, versus something really taking root and growing. So for me, is there a time? Sure, there's a time to try everything. I say try it all. And at the same time, I think for me, the wisdom is creeping in of like, I think there's this way for me to do things that's going to be a lot more enjoyable for me, that isn't so fast and frenzied and led by my mind.
Right. So in a way, you're investing more in one long-term venture, as I get it, by going into the present moment and like focusing your mind more on what you're doing in the short term.
That's right. Yeah. So my mind is spending more time like re-examining what's happening in my body, what's happening in the moment, versus just on the next clever creative thing I can come up with that is fun for a moment, but kind of fizzles too fast for my body. And so I do want to keep coming back to this notion that feelings and the body and the mind are all interconnected. It's all a system that I believe, a system that is our way of making sense of things, but also being led, right? Like, or guided. When we have a fear of something dangerous like fire, it's protecting us, the feeling.
Right.
And same if we're having a tremendous, sometimes you get that feeling in the center of your stomach, when you have to make a decision or you have to talk to somebody about something. That feeling to me means, wow, this is really important. Pay attention. Tend to this. Like, don't ignore this feeling right now. Okay. Versus what we often do is you go drink some beers, or you go and, watch some shows, and you just escape the feelings, and you don't ever let your mind just tend to them. Even if we don't know what they mean, but just like, I like the word tending, because it's like, until it's gone, it's still there.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I try to not completely go into the present moment all the time. I try to spend some time in my higher level thinking brain as well. And I'm interested because feelings can be wrong sometimes as well, right?
Well, what do you mean by wrong?
They can misguide you. Right? You can become angry at someone for something they haven't even done, or you can be very biased if you follow your feelings all the time.
But is it the feeling that's wrong, or is it the mind that told you that they did the thing that's wrong? So is the feeling or the mind wrong in that scenario?
Yeah, I mean,
because the feeling is just a feeling, right?
Yeah, they're so interconnected in many situations that it's hard to separate them, in my experience.
Yeah, and I would say that the danger in this dynamic, right, where that's such a good example, is you get angry with somebody for something they didn't do. That's an example of our mind creating meaning where there wasn't clarity. And the mind, that's where the mind, I think, is so tricky, is that it always wants to make meaning of all of our feelings. But what if we just didn't do that so fast? What if we just went, wow, I'm really angry right now. And then the mind goes, oh, well, he may have done something wrong. And it's like, yeah, but the feeling that didn't tell me that for sure. I just know that I'm angry. And so can we then stay open enough to inquire? So say that comes to be like, hey, by the way, I'm feeling some feeling. Did you even do this thing that I think, like so much of what people think is made up. I think we can agree on that, right?
Yeah.
We have no idea whether it's right or, especially when it comes to other people or what people think of us. No idea.
Yeah.
I could be making up all kinds of things right now about what you're thinking about me, even during the show, but I'll save myself the time because I just don't know unless I just ask you.
Right.
So that to me is why I'm practicing more. If I've started to feel a little anxious, talking to you and going, ooh, something feels off, then I might speak to that and say, hey, I'm feeling a little bit anxious. I'm not sure if something is off here. And you might say, no, everything's great. And I'd be like, okay, great, then let's continue. But there's a process of, for me, when we're talking about feelings, of listening to them. Like I like to think, I tell people in more like technology spaces that feelings are data. And data on its own has no meaning until you apply meaning to data. And so, and you could apply the wrong meaning to data and you could have a very weird situation on your hands. Correct? And so I like to say the same thing with feelings. You could apply the wrong meaning to the data you're getting and have a really weird outcome. So there is some nuance to staying present enough with the feeling to allow the true meaning to emerge. And it may not be clear right away. It may be a feeling, and I think that's what's hard for people who end up with like diagnosed depression and stuff, is that they're just having all these feelings that they don't ever really make sense to them. And so then they just go down into the pit, so to speak, and get stuck there. And that's what depression is. It's being stuck in a set of feelings that are really unpleasant without a clear way out. From people I know who've had depression, who have gone out of it, that it's sort of how they describe it. It's a being stuck.
If there's someone listening who is stuck, what would you tell them to help them out of their feelings?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is just like, if somebody is listening who is experiencing that, I would just offer the first bit of hope or help to them is a belief that things can get better. And that's sort of like, there's a great quote that if you're in the darkness right now and you're listening to this, that you may actually be the light. As I paraphrase a famous quote, that if, it's like, if all you see is darkness all around, you don't see the light, you actually might be the light, and your healing and your ability to get help and move forward will be transformative for everybody you know.
Right.
And all you have to do is get into your own life and your own healing. Sorry for that disruption.
No problem.
Because it's that painful. I mean, people in depression, it will grip your life. I know it's very painful, very difficult. And so I don't minimize that in any way, but I would say that I have known people personally. There are all kinds of treatments. There are alternative plant medicine treatments now. There's Western, um, medicine available, but like get help, like get. And if you've already gotten help and nothing's worked, then let's figure out what, reach out to David, give me a call. Like, let's get you the help. Let's start making a prayer for your life where you can move forward. Because ultimately there is no stuck. That's an illusion, right? Like life is always moving forward.
Yeah.
Things feel the same day to day. Ultimately, it's a new day, and the sun apparently is changing. Someone told me the sun is going from a hydrogen center to a helium center. So like our own sun is changing. Like everything is changing. We are changing. Like the perception that we're the same is false. Our cells are changing all the time. The water we drink that occupies our body is always being flushed in and out and changing. Like everything is changing. And so the idea of being stuck in a feeling is only partially true, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Everything changes. And if you are depressed and listening to this, you've probably felt well at some point in your life. And that's something that I've kept as a principle for myself, that anytime I feel down, I want to recall a happy experience, which then makes me see that the feeling that I'm stuck in isn't permanent. It is temporary. It will come and go just as the happy moment did. But I think that we've gone through extensively, and I've learned a lot about how one can manage one's own emotions. So I'm interested, how can we listen better to other people's emotions and learn from their emotions?
Yeah, well, I think even just your question around like how do we listen better as a people on this planet?
Yeah.
How do we listen better to each other, to the planet itself? We're not very doing a good job of that, of the listening to, environmental conditions and whatnot. I think the beginning of listening starts with surrendering to not having to say anything, to really hear someone without having to wait to reply back, to not have to fill in the space afterwards, to really, and I like how you've been talking about mindfulness and presence. Like true listening requires a certain presence and a certain, when I listen to someone, I like to try to see the best in them. Even if it's a difficult conversation, I try to quiet my mind, see the best in them and listen, and not feel like I have to say something right when they're done. That I can have some pause, that I can receive whatever it is they're saying. And then from a new place, because here's the deal, if we're really listening, there should be some wonder in us about what is it that person's saying or going to say that maybe we've never heard before. That wonder will quiet our mind, because it is quite amazing that we can listen to each other.
Yeah.
Right? Like even if you just take listening as like a phenomenon, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, everything is cool that we're even experiencing in the first place, if you want to take it to the extreme.
I love taking it to the extreme, but I like doing it for listening specifically because listening gets overlooked a lot. And so I think making listening cool and listening the thing that allows for opening and for new things to happen, that through that wonder of listening, then people can really hear each other's emotions. And we can start to listen better to, tone of voice, facial expression, body posture, heart rhythm. I mean, if someone's talking to you and you can almost see their heart beating out of their chest, something's intense for them. And so can we soften and even see that? I'm a big believer in nonviolent communication. Are you familiar with NVC?
Not any more than
But you've heard of it.
Understand the name.
Yeah. But
no,
it's
not
very
really.
powerful.
No.
So I recommend it for you and for your audience. But one of the basic notions is through the listening is observation. So I think if you're, to answer your question, I think if we look at listening as a form of observation, then the emotional landscape will illuminate itself through that process.
Mm.
That as a listener, I become an observer. And in that observation, I'm observing someone's presence, their attitude, their emotions.
Right. So, what's the difference between observing your own emotions, or is there a difference, and observing somebody else's emotions?
I think the only difference would be that with practice, you will have more certainty about your own emotions, and it will always be a subjective guess at what someone else is feeling without them telling you.
Mm.
But otherwise, it's pretty similar because we are one ultimately, right? We are all just extensions of each other. So I don't think it should be that different.
What do you mean when you say that? That we're
I mean, like we're an
extensions?
interconnected species on a planet, all sharing the same resources. The water you drink in Sweden is water that may have rained down in California
Mm.
5 years ago. I mean, like the
Right.
water is kind of, we are all drinking that there's water in me that could have been in, your ancestors hundreds of years
Right.
ago as it populates and moves. So our level of shared connection, like another way to say it is like the water in me is the same water in you. We're actually carriers of the same thing. So if you think of the emotional body as water, for example, then it would be really similar.
Right.
I mean, I'm getting kind of out there for you and your audience, so I like it. So far, we're still here, but that this is part of the, like, we're so mystified by emotions, yet we all have them, and we have no
Yeah.
idea what each other are feeling most of the time because we hide them so well.
Yeah.
But through observation and more shared experience and more shared, then it becomes more clear how to share with each other our feelings and to be with each other through them. We don't have to fix each other's emotions. Like if you present me with, I'm feeling really sad, it's not my job to like make you happy.
Mm.
My first role is to observe you in your sadness and really see you and let you know that I see you and
Mm.
that you're safe here with me with your feelings.
Mm. So, observation is a first step, or maybe if you're interacting with someone, a second step after you ask questions to understand emotions. How can we ask better questions to understand people's emotions better?
Well, and I just want to add, I think before even observation is probably presence, right?
Mm.
It's hard to observe if you're not there fully. So if we're going to do steps, I would say, yeah, get present, find your feet on the ground, take your breath, be there, be here now, as Ram Dass would say, and
Mm.
then observe. And through your observation, just like you're doing in this podcast, you're observing, you're listening, and then a question emerges.
Mm-hmm.
It bubbles up.
Yeah.
Someone left out a piece of a story, or someone didn't mention a detail that's interesting. And so then that is the most powerful when somebody's telling somebody something and then someone asks a good question because that person feels seen, they feel listened to.
Mm.
So yeah, so maybe step 3 is validating your listening and that you are there and you're listening and you're tracking and you're here for them and
Mm.
you're validating their experience. And that's good for managers, or it's good for husbands and wives, and it's good for parents, and it's good for friends. Like it's just kind of like these skills we're talking about can go any place you are.
Mm.
There's like there's no place where presence, observation, and good communication will not help you, that I can
Yeah,
think of.
those seem very universally good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure I caught an answer to my last question.
Please.
But I really did appreciate your
Yeah, ask it again then.
improvements on my steps. Yeah, sure, I will. Um, how can we ask better questions?
Mm. I think the better questions tend to come from being insightful and curious and not just programmatic.
Mm.
So if you're when you ask me a question and you seem curious, it evokes a curiosity and wonder in me that wants to answer it in a really good way.
Right.
versus if we just ask pragmatic, or we state the obvious, and it's kind of like, or you ask a question, like the opposite example, you ask a question of something that's already been answered, and the person who's talking going, were you even listening?
Yeah, right.
So I think curiosity, I think, is a great tool for asking good questions.
Mm,
I don't see how you could go wrong.
right.
And I might also add consent. It may be helpful to ask somebody, is it okay if I ask this kind of like if it's personal?
Right.
Can I ask that question about what's going on with you and your girlfriend? Or you and it's like, are you and your
Right.
boyfriend? Like, can I? Oh yeah, okay. So consent is another good tool, I
Right.
think, for question asking. Curiosity and consent.
Yeah.
Did I answer the question now? I want to make sure I did
Yes.
it.
Yes.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Where can our listeners learn more about you and your ventures?
I think the best place to go is to my podcast, The Muse and the Catalyst. It's on the iTunes store. So it's Muse, Muse, and the Catalyst, Catalyst. You could go to our website, or you could just go to the podcast. But yeah, that's where I generally share all the good stuff that I'm working on and thinking about.
Right. We'll link to that in the show notes.
Great.
And thank you, Aaron Schiller, for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I hope it was helpful to you and to your audience. Good luck to you. Keep going.